two of the Tan were said to be the original inhabitants of Ireland, but they all disappeared underground into their dolmens and cairns and whatever you have. That's where the myth comes from, fairy folk, pixies.
The Daoideann being what English people would call fairies, ethereal otherworld spirits.
It is almost in the air here, some sense of otherworld or some sense of something more than the immediate.
The Daoideann came to Ireland, and they brought with them the entire system of beliefs, the pantheon of the gods that was worshipped for maybe 2,000 years afterwards, and which still exists today. If you went back and tried to trace all of these superstitions, every single one would go back to that particular period in Irish mythology. They've left us all their beliefs, you know.
The Irish folk belief didn't kind of think of fairies as ethereal spirits. They were almost like another kind of human dimension.
Glenafooka.
They say it means the den of the fairies.
Definitely a lot of ghost stories been told here and the fairies and one thing another. It's heaven to me. I'm born and reared here.
It's up to whatever you want to believe in yourself.
Well, I mean, I believe in the fellow above all right, like, you know, I believe in God all right, like.
Who made God and who made the world and them more things, you know. I used to dream like this, I was dead. I was in another world. But one night it was very real now. I thought I saw Patty and another man like himself, and they going, and two arms changed, they going up in the sky, and they having a great laugh, the two of them. Well, that was so vivid in my mind, you know. I could see him, and as he was, going up to heaven or something.
Word of God, deliver us from the fear of death, Lord have mercy.
In the sky, should they have to find it, and they'll have to find the moon, and they will. Would be any sense. Oh, good.
This idea of query, where do people go? Where do people go in the past? What is beyond the horizon? The daytime, it's bright, it's positive, it's the world of the living. And at night, it's the daytime of the dead. There are two sides to life, the life and death.
I often hear people telling stories or anecdotes in pubs about other people. And the other people are not necessarily alive. Some of them are dead, but they're spoken of as though they were still alive and still part of our lives. The dead are still part of our story. They're not put away and forgotten about.
These people were a mystical divine race who came to Ireland possessing all these different treasures, the spear of Lugh, the cauldron of the Dagda and whatever. And they travelled a very circuitous route to come back to Ireland because they came from an earlier race called the Numidians. And they brought with them the entire system of beliefs, the pantheon of the gods that was worshipped for maybe 2,000 years afterwards, and which still exists today, you know.
There may be sort of folk recollection of ancient history, of people before ourselves, of a different people being here. There are all sorts of theories anyway about to explain why such ideas should come about, that there would be a different kind of people living under the ground or even under the water. I mean, there are traditions of life under the lakes and the sea as well.
Pagan, a person who doesn't believe in the Catholic religion, before a person who worships, what were they called? The old gods, as they are called, like they worship nature and the sun and the wind and the elements.
I was brought up to believe the pagans or black heathens living in the jungle. And I've always found it offensive because the black heathens happen to have a system of religious beliefs that are probably superior to our own. Most of them are animists. When they talk about pagans in Ireland, they talk about, people who had a very sophisticated culture.
There are monuments around here where I live. There are Stone Age monuments that are 5,000 years old. The Celts only came here 2,000 years or so ago. So there were people here for the best part of 2,000 years. The people who built Newgrange, like the great Newgrange tomb and things like that, were pre-Celtic peoples we know very little about.
Newgrange was built 3,100 years before Christ, BC. It stands on an older structure, about 1,000 years older than that. The people who built it certainly weren't fairies. They were geniuses. They were sort of the Einsteins of their time. It's built to precise algebraic and geometric formula that predate Pythagoras, who supposedly invented algebra, and Euclid, who supposedly invented geometry, by about 2,500 years.
It's ancient. It's thousands of years old. The stones are built in the form of a passage that way, and there's a little passage going between. And for whatever reason, we don't know, I suppose that when the sun sets on the shortest day of the year, the sun actually shines straight into where the people were buried. So they were following the sun, or they had some symbolism or whatever it was, we don't know.
I would say that it is essentially a solar observatory because every stone on it is painted with solar symbols. They all relate to the cycle of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and that in turn gives, if you're a druidic caste, that gives you power over everybody else because you know the right time to plant, the right time to sow, and if the locals don't do what they're told, you can tell them there's going to be an eclipse and you know exactly when it's going to be. You can put the fear of God in them,
I wouldn't go into that when I was a child. I was afraid of it.
What were you afraid of?
Fairies. Before a lot was born, they walked around this land here.
For centuries upon centuries, we had more saints than anybody else per square inch in this country. They were all pagans. St. Bridget is our patron saint, our female patron saint. She became sort of nunnified, turned into a nun, supposedly. St. Patrick was real. He stood on two legs and walked. All the other saints, except for St. Lawrence O'Toole and Blessed Oliver Plunkett, were all Tuatha Danann.
There were odd people who still did things. I mean, they still go out and they tie rags on bushes on St. Bridget's Day and things like that. But that's sort of more of a, keeping up an old tradition or something like.
In the middle of all this sort of religious belief, you do have a huge amount of pre-Christian beliefs that are contained within it. It's useful that it survives, because with it survive a lot of the more sort of, odd bits of religion left down to us from our forebears, All the locals believed in fairy spirits and, they'd leave milk out for them at night. They could also practice a lot of malevolent, I suppose you wouldn't call it witchcraft, but cursing, where they could curse a rack of hay and could bring it to ruin. I think how they did that was by putting sort of usually rancid butter at the bottom of the pile that rotted everything, from the bottom up.
People that you had anything in for, if possible to destroy them, you put eggs in there among the spuds and you put butter on the handle of the door or the latch and all that kind of stuff.
And I see butter on every window into his garden boy. The butter on the window sill.
There was sort of what appeared to be sort of to him was butter on the post, the gate post, and he was a bit worried about it, Was it somebody that was trying to do him harm? Deep down, there would be that little bit of fearing of somebody.
Butter, of course, was a product of milk, and that was if you had cows, they'd go dry, they'd have no milk. So, God, we were full of them, dear. Oh, God help us. And absolutely the things were done, nobody's business.
Banshee simply means the woman, fairy. She is sort of translated into English as fairy, you know.
Oh, the Banshee was in it all right. Dressed in white, all in white, coming up here. And she'd come in the night and keen, it's called, you know. Ooh.
She's supposed to look like, it's a woman all in white, long white robes flowing in the wind, no physical form, long hair down to her knees, which just blows in the wind. And she's not supposed to have any actual facial features. You're not supposed to be able to define that now.
Well, the Banshee we had that night anyway, you know, yowling like a cat.
Oh, sure, I had the Banshee one night. I was here on my own at 14 years of age. And the following night a neighbour of mine crashed, and then during that night then he passed on. That's all there was to tell you, like. I just heard the Banshee crying, that's all. But that much more to I just heard the person crying down there. In the light of that night. And it wasn't a human. But that more to tell you, like. I shall I presume, said the Banshee. I mean, the following evening the chap crashed, and he passed on then during that night. So I mean, there must be something in that, isn't there? I don't know. Do you? What would she helm you for? What's she got to helm you for? A woman that passed on be generations before that, I don't know. She must have some contact with the next world. A person that knows another person that's passing on. So now, where do you go from here?
I actually thought somebody must have been literally tying a cat up and strangling her or something, you know. But I went out onto the window with my lump of turf, and there was nobody there, nothing there, but you could hear this way, and suddenly my hair began to stand up, and I thought, Jesus Christ, that's really strange. I did the best thing, which is to get under the bed, cover my head, and try to block it out, you know. But the next morning, anyway, I got up, and there was a bang on my door. Mrs. Cummins come up the stairs to tell me that Frank had died. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, oh, I know it, poor Frank is dead, he's after dying. Now, Frank lived in New York, we were living in Dublin, you know. And 3 days later, a telegram arrived to say Frank had died at that particular point in time, you know. So since then, I thought that was definitely a Banshee. That's the only time I've ever heard anything like that in my life. But don't ask me to explain it. No idea.
Apparently, when he was getting this hay, and he was getting it, I suppose, where he shouldn't be getting it, maybe, but he heard the Banshee. And he dropped everything and ran home, and he was as white as a sheet, and he was frightened out of his life, and he got an awful fright. But and somebody in the area, somebody belonging to him, had died on the night, now, as it so happened. Now, believe it or not, it could be anything.
My two aunts, they saw her. They're cutting cabbages in the yard or something, the summer's evening, and she came along and passed them by. And she come in her hair. She took no notice that they didn't appear like.
They used to believe long ago that all right, you know. Yeah. When a person would be passing on, yeah. She was supposed to be sitting there and combing her hair and crying out, you know.
It's a very consoling belief. It's a very nice one, very consoling. It's family. It's the idea that it's one of your ancestors, that somebody has come to take you away, that somebody is going to cross over with you and you join the community of the dead of your ancestors on the other side. At least that's how people have worked it out down over the centuries. So you're not going on your own. You're accompanied by one of your own. So it fits in with people's desires and requirements and a sense of identity and so on. And then being the protectress of the land, being the goddess of war. So you have many dimensions, many imaginations and conceptions of the other world. It's the land of women. It's the land of the dead.
All the old people long ago, you know, they had all them stories and everything, you know, but today every road is so busy with cars and everything, they must have killed them all.
That's why I say, you know, the tragedy is that thousands and thousands of these stories have been lost just because the old people haven't been got in time.
They'll have an interest in it, you know what I mean? It's folklore, it's interesting, you know what I mean? Not many people my age do now, but it's fun, you know what I mean?
There's more in this world than we think about, than we know about. I'm convinced of that.
That's Ireland, yeah. That's Ireland.
God help us. Them are the days.
Let me ramble along the prairie. Hello, seeking steers and old berets with my body slim and tame. Give me my boots